next speaker is a lady that I know very well. Cait's a mother, a family disability and human rights advocate, and would like to welcome Cait to the stage.
That was wonderful, Pastor Clive. Thank you very much. I feel so much better now doing my speech after prayer. Hello everyone, and thank you for coming to join us this evening to discuss a law proposal that needs to be spoken about, challenged and rejected. Firstly, though, I'd like to give thanks to the President of this venue, Sandro, and his staff for accommodating us and for everything you do for us. Thank you, Sandro and Tim. Now, I'm sure I will say a few things that will ruffle the feathers of the woke left and the radical feminists who loves to push their evil agenda onto the majority. However, I'm not concerned about their opinions, as I have a few truths to say. When the government wages war on families, it is our moral responsibility to speak out and defend what is right and just. Government interference and control over people's lives is a huge problem. Politicians are not God, nor should we treat them as if they are. I can speak from a woman and a mother's perspective about the facts and what I have seen over the years with the overreach of government interference and intrusion into our lives and families. I also see that this proposed legislation is pushed by the woke few that has no regard for family and children. We cannot allow the rights of good parents to be removed or violated. Just because a woke MP in Parliament is sexist enough to state that women are always better at raising children than men does not mean that this is true or should be allowed, let alone supported. It is the right of every parent, every good parent, to parent their child. As a woman, I see a lot that's very wrong with this extremist ideology. Indeed, taking away a father's parental rights to raise and see his own children is absolutely disgusting and immoral. It's absolutely against everything any decent person should stand for. It is, in my opinion, basically the work of the devil. As mentioned by Senator Pauline Hanson on Sky News last week, under John Howard's amended legislation, Shared Parental Responsibility Act of 2006, both fathers and mothers acquired equal parental rights to spend time with their children and raise them, including being involved in all aspects of their lives. Under the current Labour government and this new amendment of the legislation tabled by this federal Queensland MP Graham Parrott, his intention is to remove the equal shared parental rights and only have women raise the children. This is a recipe for disaster, and we cannot sit back, staying silent on this absolutely outrageous proposal. I think it's important that people understand who the people are behind this radical legislation. Mr. Graham Parrott, MP Graham Parrott, the first MP to propose these amendments, was an English school teacher and at the same time the author of erotic novels. He is not someone, in my opinion, that should be putting any legislation forward for families. After all, the mainstream media considers his books, and I quote, sleazy erotic novels, and someone who often expresses anti-male opinions. Of course, many women also face terrible situations when going through this traumatic family law system, when they can't afford a lawyer to represent them, and others, the other side, can. It becomes a very drawn-out, painful process. They too lose time with their children, and many of them lose their children completely. This unjust and dysfunctional family law system really affects so many good people, both men and women alike. However, the agenda pushed here is that only women are deemed fit and capable to raise children. How ridiculous and false statements are coming out of the Parliament. I can tell you that every child needs the input, love, support and influence of their dads in their lives. This nonsense that men are not required is nothing short of ridiculous. It's a false narrative that the feminist extremist movement keeps pushing hard, so that men are treated like a bank, an ATM that keeps pushing out money. They are treated as if they are only sperm donors and tossed aside and of no value. This is so very wrong, and everyone with any honour, integrity or a moral compass will not stand for this. I have issues with the way I have seen the family court treat many parents. I know so many good parents that get treated very poorly. In fact, I have seen no justice being served to them at all. This is not what God calls fair or just across the scriptures and gospel. The problem is with the woke left cohort of individuals, as they do not hold family in high regard, and they act as if the children are far better off without their dads. We all know that children and young people get affected greatly, emotionally and psychologically, as a result of father absence. When we use the old saying, it takes a village to raise a child, this is a true statement. However, it's not just a village of only women that's required. It's a good balance of mothers, fathers, grandparents and extended families from both sides. That provides a healthy influence on every child. Most of us in our generation had that village, and our children and future generations of children deserves exactly the same. It's a very sad predicament to our great nation that courts may decide what is supposedly best for a child according to unjust laws. These changes in the legislation is destined to destroy far too many innocent lives. We are doomed if we don't stand up now and do something about this absolute madness. The Australian government never ceases to amaze me. One minute they openly and publicly on the record can't define what a woman is in Parliament, whilst trying the next minute to push the decisive agenda as to say that only women can raise children and not men. I wasn't aware that they can actually know what a woman is over there in Canberra. How woke can the Parliament go? I have met many individuals, and men in particular, whose injustices perpetrated by the family courts has almost cost them everything, including their own lives. The unnecessary pain and suffering they are put through is so outrageous and should never be allowed in any court in this nation. They have their lives undermined and what should be the best of their lives, and not able to discuss publicly what happens inside those buildings that we the taxpayer pays for and for everyone in them. They can't defend themselves fairly and get shut down if they challenge the injustice. And so many of them are hardly ever believed or listened to. This needs to change as a matter of urgency. I will also add that I don't think in a democracy any government, state or federal, should have the power to appoint and handpick members of the judicial elite. There should be a more proper separation of power and a fair and unbiased balance, so that proper justice is delivered across the board. There is one more thing I want to shed light on from knowing those great men over the years here in Perth. They get VROs, which is violent restraining orders for those of you that don't know, slapped on them at the drop of a hat without due process afforded to them. In a rule of law system, everybody is supposed to be innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. However, what I have seen as a woman, it really bothers me, is the courts handing out VROs like lollipops on men and giving the children to the mother, leaving these children without having no contact with their dads at all. But yet the dads are demanded to pay support and fight the unjust system for years to try to see their own children. For those out there that say there's a need for restraining orders, I do fully agree with you. They do serve a purpose. However, why should the majority of good men and fathers be punished for the terrible behaviour of the minority of men who are bad? Something else that needs to be spoken about and needs to change is how some women in particular lie under oath in court, committing perjury in order to get those VROs and make the dads look out to be terrible monsters. Then they drop the VROs they put on the dads, which actually stop the men from seeing their own children for months. more in some cases. But when the man tries to get the courts to follow through with the VROs and not remove them, because they can prove their innocence, the judges don't want to hear what the men and fathers has to say and dismisses the case. In fact, multiple men have told me that they were even denied the right to justice to hold those who committed perjury to account, as the judges would not allow this. Last time I checked, under the laws of the land, perjury was a criminal offence. This crime should be transferred to the police for proper investigation. I find it outrageous that good parents' reputations get tarnished in court over false allegations, dragged through the trauma of being alienated from the children they love, and then find they are not afforded the natural justice of defence, nor afforded the chance to expose the truth. I think the whole family law system and the VRO legislation needs an immediate overhaul, quite frankly. Such wickedness. It's hard to believe that this is how our justice system operates. This should not be okay with any of us. We should always defend the right of every individual to get justice and be truthful in our ways. This is certainly not following due process or upholding every individual's God-given rights. The lack of justice and fairness in the system as we stand now is unfathomable, and I can only imagine that it will be 1,000 times worse if this amendment of legislation goes through. I know that some of those with extreme feminist views will clash with me as a woman on my stance on this injustice. That is because they hate men and don't think of them as anything other than an ATM machine or a sperm donor, and that's even debated by some of the ranks of the men-hating extreme feminist movement. Some of this radical woke feminist extremist mob thinks they're entirely responsible for making babies, and that men have nothing to do with the process and should have no say at all. I find this completely outrageous. I'd like to talk about something that not many want to talk about, and that is the high rates of suicide amongst our men. The highest we have ever seen in this country, in fact. The fact that such a high volume of great men commit suicide because many of them can see their children, and this gets brushed under the carpet as if it's not happening. This destruction should be a great concern to all of us, and it needs to be addressed immediately, in my opinion. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, and you can find this on their own website, in 2021, there were 3,144 deaths due to suicide, 2,358 males and 786 females. That is 3 times as many men suicide in Australia every week. And the government keeps totally ignoring this. That's 45 plus males a week suiciding in Australia, 9 times the number of the deaths per week than the feminist-driven National Domestic Violence Campaign and groups such as White Ribbon have currently been promoting. So where is the outrage over the deaths of so many of our good Australian men? Where is the hundreds of millions of dollars in funding every year for male suicide from the ignorant Australian government? A high volume of these great men commit suicide, many because they're not supported during separation, alienated from their children based on lies and deceit. And all this gets brushed under the carpet as if it's not happening. Did you know that these Australian courts violate the UN Convention on the Rights of a Child? This happens many times a day. The Australian government and the law cartel totally ignore it, even though Australia was one of the founding signatories of the United Nations. Did you know that in 2015, PM Malcolm Turnbull pledged a $100 million package and said the high levels of violence against women by partners or family members as a disgrace. However, there was no funding for men who are victims of domestic abuse. Did you know that in March 2022, the Morrison government pledged $189 million for preventing domestic violence and improving women's safety and economic security? However, no funding for men to prevent domestic violence against men and improving their safety and economic security. Did you know in 2022, the Green Senator Larissa Waters wanted 12 billion over 12 years to prevent domestic violence against women. And did you know the Albanese government is delivering a record 1.7 billion investment over 6 years to end violence against women and children? However, there was no funding to end violence against men. Did you know that 1.3 billion has been awarded to implement a 10-year national plan to end violence against women and children? And did you know that this money will be used for incentives that supports prevention of violence, early intervention, responses, recovery and healing? How much of this massive funding will be spent on prevention of male suicide? I think we all know the answer to that. Did you know that there is a federal minister for women? Her name is Senator Cait Gallagher. But did you know that there's no federal minister for men? Did you know that there is a federal office for women? However, there's no federal office for men. And did you know that there is a women's safety minister? However, there is no men's safety office. There's no men's safety minister. I find a lot wrong with this and very biased. The destruction of family. I, as a mother and a woman, I will never support this evil woke ideology that has and is infiltrating every part of our government, the judicial system, education departments by the few in the attempt to destroy families and children. Anyone who thinks the government and unelected woke left bureaucrats and family lawyers has the best interest of the children and families at heart are absolutely kidding themselves. The only people that benefit from the trauma of family law system are those that are getting paid to participate. If children were allowed to have a voice, I'm sure we would hear the brainwashing they are fed to hate the other parent. And it's the dad in the majority of the situations that are hated and targeted. So many suffer in silence, some make it through as a shell of the men they once were, and sadly some don't. In my opinion, it's all done by design. I personally don't think we need family court, or in fact, need to have the government involved at all in our family affairs. I certainly don't think the Parliament, both federal and state, should be dictating to anyone how to go about their business in the event of separation or divorce. Yes, there are some that can't agree. However, we certainly don't need a state that has its own family law acts and rules separate from the rest of the country. A state family court has its own set of family court rules that is 366 pages long and updated every year since 1997 when it was introduced. In my view, everything should go to mediation in an attempt to reach a fair balance in the best interest of the children that the parents created together. In the majority of cases, this will lead to far better outcomes for the children, and we will have young people with far less emotional, psychological and mental health issues as a result. In my view, the government are wasting our hard-earned tax money. In many family court cases, the child is giving an ICL, which is appointed as the child's own representative. They are known as an independent children's lawyer. We should ask, how independent are they really? In many cases, they do not enhance the well-being of these young individuals. The only individuals who gain from this are the lawyers. These lawyers get rich at the taxpayer's expense, all funded by the government department known as legal aid. Within this system, children are treated like the steak in the sandwich, but the government and legal industry wants us to believe that what they are doing was best for the child. I don't think so. The outcomes is not about what's morally right or just, it's about who wins. Pulling the children into unnecessary drama is evil in itself and very harmful. The poor children are supposed to pick a side so they don't disappoint either parent. It's no wonder anxiety and depression is on the rise amongst our children and young people. But to fix the harm that's caused to children, the so-called experts recommend a handful of meds from Big Pharma, which does not fix anything. It only creates a generation of young people dependent on medications for the rest of their lives. This nonsense needs to stop. All of us should unite as a society and care about all those innocent children. By having the government involved passing ridiculous, unjust laws and the courts deeming what they think is fitting will only end in disaster and not in the best interest of any man, woman or child in this nation today or in the foreseeable future. Attacks from feminist extremists. People, but in particular women from extreme feminist groups, question me quite often as a woman speaking out. They ask why I have strong opinions on men, and particularly dads, being involved in raising their children and why I defend them. I actually defend good parents, regardless of gender, and I defend what is right and just concerning this subject. I simply say to them, we all have a duty to correct what is wrong. God made man and woman. He made many of them fathers and mothers. He gave them both equally the responsibility to raise their children and teach them well, to love and encourage them, and to do everything they can for them. He didn't say that a child should have only one parent, or for a mother to raise the children on her own, especially when the other parent, who happens to be a man, is willing, able, and capable of raising their children. The extremist feminist agenda that all us women should agree with them, that think we should agree with them, and treat men and dads as if they're non-existent or dead, but still take every dollar we can from them, and certainly don't give them any opportunity to be involved in their own children's lives or their upbringing. As a woman and a mother, I find this extreme feminist ideology appalling and evil, so I do clash with them on this subject, because the views that they push is not how the majority of good women with a good character and conscience think or act. I'm all for the original feminist movement, what started out as something good many decades ago, which served and still serves a purpose, has now turned into a radical extreme feminism. They are so anti-men, and they spread constant hate towards males. In my opinion, they are deliberately trying to destroy the role of men and fathers in society. The weak men in Parliament have jumped on their bandwagon, so they get elected. And unfortunately, this woke nonsense gets them votes. Weak men who are self-serving, and put their own interest above what's morally and ethically right. Those spineless men are very welcomed by the radical feminists for good reason. It's not because they like those weak men in positions. It's to use them as a stepping stone for them to push their evil agendas, such as this legislation we're discussing here this evening. We all need to stop dads being tossed aside as if they don't matter. Every child deserves the best of us adults. We must stand up and truly look out for the children. We as men and women, fathers and mothers, need to do what's right, to not be vicious or bitter when our relationships don't work out, because it's only the children that suffer. We need to resist the evil extreme feminist agenda that's pushed on us, and to never support the alienation of a loving relationship between a child and the other parent. Statistics prove that the well-balanced children do far better in school and in life in general, and when they know that they have the unconditional love of both parents. Happy, well-adjusted children become well-adjusted adults. We need to stop allowing government and influencers interfering in the upbringing of our children. This legislation, regardless if this legislation affects you personally today, if it is passed, it could and definitely will affect your rights as a parent, and it will affect future generations. Once your parental rights are removed, we will have future generations of children being raised with absent fathers or mothers. As parents in today's world, we should all want our future generations to thank us for standing up for what is right. I encourage you all to file your submissions and tell your family and friends to do also. We should all want the children and young people of this nation to grow up well-balanced and loved by both parents, and to push back against this work of Satan. I will finish with this. I think God is very clear across the gospel and scriptures when it comes to the role of parents. I could run through many, but I will just include a few. For example, The scriptures tells us in Ephesians 6:4, a father is implored to bring up their children in the ways of the Lord, to discipline them, to encourage, comfort, and instruct them. In Proverbs 1:8 it says, hear, my son, your father's instruction, and forsake not your mother's teaching. In Ephesians 6:1-3 it says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. Thank you all for listening to me tonight, and let's all stand together to raise the children of this nation, to teach them wrong from right, to not miss out on valuable time with both their parents, and for parents to think of the children first and resist the work of the devil that is working overtime to destroy what God created. I ask all of you to take action today and do your submissions on the website so that future generations will know we stood up and resisted the work of Satan. Thank you. And just one more thing that's outside of this before we go to the open mic is we have our lovely friend here, Terry Hall from Perth today, and it's his birthday. So I think we should all sing him a happy birthday, don't you think? Yes. All right. Who wants to be the singer? All right, how can I be the singer? Who's going to sing?